Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of TEAMTIM Live.
Oh, we just lost him. You're mute.
I suppose I ought to have my other screen on mute before I actually come off mute, so that we're not getting echo. Hey, it wouldn't be TEAMTIM without a couple of kickoff shenanigans, right? And so, oh my goodness, it is the end of June. Wow. Already. Hey, everybody, how's your cute quarter numbers looking? You meet your quota, hopefully, right? Because we're starting off a new quota next week. And so we're really excited to have our good friend Paul here this week. We're going to do some role playing, right? We're going to kind of talk a little bit about, like, what does this look like to sell stuff to small businesses? But before we do, without further ado, Mr. Tim, how are you today?
What's going on? Tim Schnurr, Inquisitive IT, helping out investors, retirees, high net worth individuals secure themselves with hardened Chromebooks, hardened iPads in the future as well. But I'm excited about this episode. We've been talking about this hallway style a little bit, Tim and Jesse, having a conversation very similar to, if you've seen MSP Dojo, Robert Gillette talks and does a little role playing IT sales. We're going to talk about compliance sales. Well, we won't jump right straight into it. We'll talk specifics and kind of is it inbound, outbound, give you a little more context just so that I think we can help you, understand how we've gone to market, what our experience is there, and what's worked and what hasn't.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And obviously our good friend Jesse. Hey, did I just see something on LinkedIn a second or two ago? Did we have some sort of empathic kind of thing happen on LinkedIn? What's going on, my friend?
Yeah, no, we've been working on this in the background, and it's kind of been happening informally. But Power PSA and our vCISO training platform, PowerGrid, are joining forces with Empath, which is an upskilling platform and an LMS for MSPs, to deliver a co-branded extension of PowerGrid's functionality. So obviously, when you come into the PowerGrid, you learn how to build and scale vCISO programs, start to finish for your business. Inevitably, you're going to run into that you're going to need people to deliver those skills and those services. So although you may have skilled people, you want to continually upskill them and build a pipeline of talent. And that's where Empath comes into the mix. So basically, long and short of it is any PowerGrid member is going to be getting a free Empath membership for the perpetuity of their license in the PowerGrid. And then eventually we will be bringing some more pieces of that to Empath as well, but there's more to come on that. So yeah, very excited about the partnership, and I think it's a win-win-win for Empath, PowerGrid, and the MSP community.
I love that. Jesse bringing the power, right? Awesome.
Yeah, connect to the grid, your source of power.
Exactly. I love what they're doing over there at Empath. We've got a couple of courses that we're building out right now. We're kind of eyeball deep into what the heck is governance, what the heck is compliance, and we're rolling those things out. Our good friends Alex and Wes. So I love what you're doing, Jesse. All these things coming together, right? Jesse's with the Power Grid, myself with a couple of GRC tools, and hey, we're talking about selling compliance. But before we get into that, Mr. Paul, come on up and say hello, my friend.
What's going on?
You got a new gig going on, my friend, don't you?
I do. I've only been here since April 1st with Estendio. I think we've all known each other from the channel for quite a while, but yeah, it still feels pretty new. If it was a baby, people would still be asking me if it's sleeping through the night.
Awesome. You want to talk just real briefly? I'll give you an opportunity to talk about Estendio, of course. This is your time to shine, my friend.
Well, thanks very much, and I appreciate you having me on today. Much appreciated for the invitation. Estendio is a full compliance and risk management solution, GRC software at its core, But we consider ourselves channel first, partner obsessed. I know you hear that a lot. Tim, I was an MSP for 14 years, right? And I was working very heavily in healthcare, DoD manufacturing, kind of those compliance centered industries. And something that I think you and I definitely agree on is that the MSP space has struggled with getting the client base out there to really adopt to compliance and cybersecurity as time has moved on. They've struggled to find the right platforms and tools to help deliver that. And at Astendio, we think we can solve that problem. We are a zero barrier to entry, walk in the door, start working with the product now, kind of the platform. And we will teach and enable the MSPs to do exactly what we're doing today, which is talk about how to go to your client, talk about cybersecurity in a way and compliance in a way that won't bore the living hell out of them and get them to move and actually make decisions. So hopefully together we can all do that.
I love that. I love that. And we are competing products, but you know me well enough to know that I like to leave my logo at the door, right? Because I believe in our community working better together, right? We at Compliance Scorecard are really wanting to work together with our partners like Jesse, like Tim, and hopefully eventually Astendio, right? Because we all recognize the challenge that MSPs face when it comes to this big, scary, compliant world. And that is not just educating ourselves as MSPs, but being able to have that conversation with our customers and getting them interested and being able to be better defensible, right? At Compliance Scorecard, we help your MSP have that risk conversation with your customer using our easy to understand compliance scorecards, backed up by our peer group. All right, enough self-promotion. Let's get into this whole thing. You know what? Maybe I'll leave you and I side by side in this layout for the moment, right? Because I love this.
Point out that you said you were ditching your logo to just uncover it right behind your head there. So
Yeah.
I'm not taking my screensaver down.
There is a thing such as subliminal marketing, right? And normally when I do TEAMTIM, I generally try not to wear the compliance, but I literally just got off another live stream 5 minutes before this. So obviously I didn't think over there. I didn't have time to change a shirt, but maybe I'll just wear it backwards. Oh, I can't wear it backwards. I'll have to wear it sideways. Yeah. Anyways,
not buying from that guy.
Yeah. Tim's like the girlfriend in the Truman Show, like.
This side? Yeah. Is it on this side over here? All right. So we have a scenario, don't we, Tim?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just talk a little bit about it. Like, we need to provide enough context here so, listeners can understand. And please jump in on the comments if you have scenarios where you've struggled or, tried to sell compliance. Jesse, I'll start with this one, right? So I think this is probably the most common. MSP legacy clients, right? Like they've been delivering IP, the full suite of VoIP and desktops and over the years, and now they're kind of jumping into this new world of compliance, right? Or even the people and processes aspect outside of the technology and cybersecurity, right? So, and they probably had a layer of tools, and now they want to jump into the compliance, market. So, why don't we do one maybe where, I don't know, you had an example, Jesse, like a and we'll have Tim do this one because he's got a lot of experience with HIPAA. And so does Paul. So
there's Paul.
Yeah. What was the name of that company, Paul? Yeah.
Is that the one? HIPAA?
Yeah. I see it all the time on MSP websites.
Oh my God.
I got the badge. I won compliance. Right. So Jesse, kick us off.
Yeah, let's say we have a Foresight dental regional or local dental office, right? We're looking at 5 to 7 users per location. We have the dentist, a couple of partners moving around between locations, but staff is local at each location. And they want to implement a work from home policy, okay, for their admin staff. And this is the type of company that you're working with. You're preparing for this meeting. What I want to go around and hear from each person is, what do you think about when I've just, in that scenario, what do you want to know next? What are you curious about? What are your questions that you're going to want to help you prep to talk to this client? Why don't we start with Paul?
So, I mean, I think, all the obvious business questions, multi-site location sounds great. It's a dentist. I'm leaving immediately to go find somebody else that spends money. No, I'm just kidding.
This is what I said too.
You had to start with a dentist, right? So
let's change it real quick. Let's switch it to dermatologist. All right, we got some money in the business. Let's put it that way.
Let's leave chiropractors and dentists to their own device. No, what's funny is that you can leave it, right? I think you can leave it with any medical practice. The first questions that you have to ask when you go into this stuff are really business questions, totally agnostic to the cybersecurity environment, because that's the way that the business owners themselves view it. They're not looking at this through the lens of cybersecurity or your IT services. They're looking at it from like, my computers are at the office. I have to get these people in. They're not worried about the safety aspect of it. They're worried about it screwing up their workflow, not being able to monitor their employees, know if they're actually working, all those kind of things. So I think the first thing you have to take a look at is, when you're working today, are you already in a process that makes you feel how, right? And you want to go in asking, are you nervous around the employees themselves and the environment, or do you feel pretty confident that your people are already doing your job? Once you have that in your head, to me, I know what direction I want to steer them from a business conversation, because my perspective in this whole thing is that they're going to buy cybersecurity and compliance because I'm either going to mitigate their risk, I'm going to grow their business, or I'm going to improve their efficiencies. It's a dentist, so he's not focusing on growing business through IT, right? And they don't understand their risk. What is keeping them awake about making their people work first and foremost? And roll this back. Well, you're killing me. And roll this back into a real conversation. So I'll have it back out for Tim.
So the first thing that I think I would kind of think about when I walked into the plastic surgeon, the dermatology office, or the dentist office, and think about, wait a minute, how are your employees working from home? Right? How are you doing that plastic surgery from home? That might be the first question I ask. Why do you really care about a work from home policy? I get it's important because maybe you have your transcription people working from home, right? Maybe you have the people that have access to the EMR working from home, right? And so my first question might be, what are they using for devices? Did you buy that computer for them, or are they just using the thing that they got from, Best Buy down the street, right? That might be my first question. Like, if we're talking about, as Jesse set the scenario up, a work from home policy, a work from home scenario, I might ask them, like, hey, that's great. Do you know what those people from home are doing on those devices, right? Are they like, have I don't know, only Power Grid open in one screen and the EDR open in the other screen? I don't know. Like, I guess if I was to think about having the business risk conversation with, the practice manager, or maybe even the head doctor there, the first thing that I would ask them is, like, do you even care about what they're doing on that machine that you don't own, that has access to all that data? Like, does that even something that would that comes top of mind for you? Because if it doesn't, then I'm done here. Like, I can't sell you a work from home policy because you don't care about it. If you did care about it, now we can get into, like, oh, well, let's just assess that, right? Because, you're my doctor. You're going to assess me just like I need to assess your environment and figure out where you're at. From there, we can probably develop some best practices for working from home.
Yeah, nice. Tim, what do you got?
I think some of it is objection handling, right? Like, they're gonna have a budget. They're gonna have kind of, I don't want to do that right now, or But Tim, I think you're talking a little bit more of you steering the conversation, right? Like, in terms of working from home or risk, or Paul talked about what's the business needs. So it's a little push and pull, right?
Yeah, I think for me, like I would, it's going to differ, and I guess what I would want to know, and maybe something that we'd want to have different playbooks for is what type of prospect is this, right? Is it a existing client? Is it a new prospect? Did they reach out to us? Were they a referral? Did we reach out to them? Those are all
go right to ICP. Why wouldn't you?
yeah.
Like you didn't set that up in the beginning of the conversation. I was assuming it was an existing customer. Darn it.
Yeah, well, this and I'm not even saying ICP. Like this could be an existing customer that's not in our ICP, and so that might affect how we handle it differently as well. But those are like meta things that I'm going to want to understand about the conversation, the way I approach it. And the reason I say that is because, like, pragmatically, something I like to say always to somebody is like, "Hey, so why am I here today? Like, what do you want to talk about?" And, that doesn't work if they're like, "Well, you called me and set this meeting and said you wanted to talk to me about cybersecurity. That's why you're here. Come on, guy." But you can change that slightly and be like, "Hey, so why'd you take this meeting?" Right? Like, what was the reason you took this meeting? What's important to you? And I think Paul hit on it, right? Like, what does the business want to do? So I want to know about the goals of the business. Like, tell me about where you're at today, where you want to go, and what the plans for the future are. Because, I think a lot of times we think about, we need to talk about cybersecurity when really, and I think Paul might have said this as well, is our purpose is really to have a business strategy discussion that happens to be about cybersecurity, right? So why did I take this meeting? Oh, well, we're worried about our security. We're worried about that. Well, tell me more about that, right? What's the goals for the business? I want to establish that because I want to anchor cybersecurity outcomes to that, and I want to make it business outcomes. Like, okay, our goal is we want to open 2 more locations within the next 2 years. Okay, how do you see cybersecurity as being a barrier to that? Because I want them to sell themselves on why they need cybersecurity, right? So they're going to tell you, we're talking compliance today. So why do you think you need compliance, or why do you need someone to run your compliance? Things like, have you tried to do this internally? What was the outcome, right? Why hasn't it been successful internally? And having them tell you that, and then saying, and then anchoring that back to that business outcome of, okay, so it hasn't been successful internally because you don't have the internal expertise, and that's holding you back from opening your 2 locations. So all of a sudden you've created that gap, and you're saying, okay, what the status quo is not going to work for me, because what happens if I don't do this? I'm not able to open those 2 locations. I can't hit my revenue goals, and I'm stuck standing still. So now there's no option to say, well, I'm just going to kind of just keep doing what I'm doing, because they've convinced themselves and told themselves that that's the problem that they need to solve, and that's why you're here. And so now you're anchored in their mind in that piece. So that's really high level, but at a beginning stage, that's what I want to think about. And I want to have that business conversation and get them talking about their goals for the business. And then we can tie that back to, again, I might come out of that conversation and be like, there's no way I can help you because you have all the things you need. And you have, my goal is to get you to good enough security, a place where you're resilient enough for your risk tolerance so that you can recover quickly from a breach or a problem rather than have it hamstring the business. And we're going to find you the best mileage for your dollar on your security spend with our compliance program. And that's what we're here to do. So sorry, I went on a bit of a monologue there, but as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about that.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Good stuff, Jesse. Yeah. So anything else to add? I mean, I'd love to have Paul sell you, Jesse.
Okay.
So something, if you don't mind,
Paul.
real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just to follow up to what you said, I think it's important when we're having the conversation about, especially compliance, as opposed to cybersecurity, because I think one thing all of us would agree on: these are not the same thing. These terms are not interchangeable, right? And so, compliance it's truly a business problem, right? Top down, it's a problem with your industry, and in many, not all, but in most cases, it's also like a vertical, or call it an industry segment problem. So one of the things I think is really important to do if you're trying to move into cybersecurity and compliance as a reseller, as a partner, whatever, is vertical specialization.
That's right.
Pick the industries that you're good at, learn about them, because the one thing that none of us really said here that we probably should all go back and kick ourselves at least slightly is, first of all, have the industry expertise to have a conversation with a dentist if you're talking to dentists, right?
Yes.
Or I used to do a lot of optometry, know what the optos this machine is. I used to do a lot of Department of Defense manufacturing. Know what a lathe is. Know what SolidWorks is, right? So when you're having those conversations, what you're reinforcing from the beginning is not only can we have this conversation about the tech you don't understand, but I can talk to you in your language about an industry that I'm good at serving because I'm part of it. So I think it's important to be a part of the supply chain to have the conversation that we led into. And I just want to throw that out there. I feel like we almost skipped that part, which is assume you know what the hell you're talking about when you walk in the conversation. If not, educate yourself on their industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tim, I'd like to hear from you, Tim Golden, because I know we were going to ICP, and thoughts on that?
I mean, that builds customer trust, right? The number of MSPs that I talk to that are interested in compliance on a daily basis, and I kind of ask those probing questions like, tell me about your client base, tell me what you're doing, right? What are you currently doing? And 100 times out of 10 I hear, well, they're all over the map. We have some of these and some of those and some of these and some of those and some of these, and I'm like, Paul, you hit the nail on the head. Like, as an MSP, ones that can scale well and ones that can have that conversation well are ones that pick a vertical, pick one thing. Tim, I say this all the time, pick one thing and do that really well, and then go to the next vertical and learn all about that, and then go to the next vertical. So that conversation that I have daily around, tell me about your customers. Tell me about the pain points within those customers. Tell me how you're approaching those customers. Are you even approaching those customers? And what I find 9 times out of 10 is I pivot the conversation from, oh, you have one HIPAA client that doesn't give a crap about paying money for a thing, but you have all 400 customers that have an insurance requirement. So let's talk about building a compliance package around the insurance requirements that you can actually sell, that they will actually understand, that will actually hit them in the pocketbook.
Yeah.
Right. And so these kinds of conversations around pivoting to the MSP and more so to their customer.
It certainly helps to have that catalyst, right? And you mentioned cyber insurance, which is one of the biggest catalysts of needing to evidence cybersecurity. That's all compliance really is, right? It's evidencing.
Yeah.
So what are the other ones? Obviously, regulatory pressure. We talk about the people and processes of that's part of the, compliance does bring some best practices along with it, which is nice outside of the cybersecurity tool set that we kind of opened with. But, so what exactly is that catalyst? It's obviously really helpful before you get on the phone or get in front of them to know what at least have a hunch of where they're going with it. So
I think that's right. And I mean, Tim, just from what you're doing with the hardened laptops, and your niche is extremely specific, right? And so I think that's a good thing. I like to see people doing that, right? So I think you're speaking from experience. You're like, hey, let's talk about privacy compliance. That's another piece too. Is privacy is going to be a big thing, but
nobody talks about that. We just talk about cyber.
Yeah, the NSP world. That's like the no.
Well, and that's why I think, like, sometimes I will say we want to get away. I don't want to say this the wrong way. Is we want to get away from compliance? No, but maybe not calling it that, because if I tell an MSP, my client, that I have a compliance and advisory package, they're like, oh, I don't need compliance, so I don't need that. They're immediately writing you off, right? It might be a cyber advisory package that assists with cyber insurance qualifications. If you have regulatory, we can help with that. But really what we're doing is providing governance and oversight for your cybersecurity program to get the best mileage per dollar, or the best protection per dollar for your spend, right? That is a much different business outcome discussion than hey, you need to be compliant. I don't need that. Compliance can mean this. They've already written you off, right? So,
Yep. And it's hard, Jesse. I mean, that you're talking about compliance, right? So, like, just this evidencing aspect and backing into it. Like, is it cyber insurance? Is it something else?
And I think that
and it's hard too, because if you were their MSP and all of a sudden you're like, what's this other thing you're trying to bring in my direction?
Right. Well, and I think too, like compliance is something that you're complying with something, right? With a framework or a standard to help secure yourself. So that doesn't translate, but I think it's more for just regulated industries. I was did a webinar this week where I was talking about cybersecurity, vCISO reporting specifically, and I said one of the main things is to not just protect yourself, but to protect your customer. The purpose of reporting is to evidence due care and due diligence to the security controls you're providing for your program. So when a client comes back, that when you get breached or something happens and a client says, we want to sue you because you didn't do right by us protecting our environment, I have months of reports showing that you did do that, right? So that's another thing to talk about with clients when you're into that conversation and talking about sustainability for the business. Right.
Well, the inverse of that is actually also true, right? When you're having this conversation, I think a lot of times customers, Tim, you were talking about insurance, and I know all of our friend Will, I'll give him a plug, is on here from Fifth Wall, right? Like they deal with insurance on a daily basis. Yeah. I don't think the customer really understands that what they're paying for cyber liability insurance is absolutely worthless if they're not compliant.
Right.
That's not something that's on their radar. That's not the conversation that they've had in their head when they signed up for this. Because here's the reality. I can go buy an auto insurance policy right now and drive completely terribly everywhere I go at 150 miles an hour. And at the end, if I get in a wreck, my insurance is still going to pay despite the fact that I was stupid, right? But that's not how this works. On the cyber liability insurance policy, that ain't the show, right? Mm-hmm. What happens is you told them you were doing certain things. You contracted based around what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And one of those things that's almost universally true in every application is one little question: are you complying with the data sovereignty and security laws and frameworks around which the data you are in has held, right? Like, do you do it? I used to have attorneys that would argue with me they didn't need to be HIPAA compliant. But when they read their cyber liability insurance policy, it is impossible to argue that when they ask about the data you hold and the laws applicable, they don't mean HIPAA too. They absolutely do mean, are you doing it? And when you finally have something happen, all those years of paying for that premium means nothing. And it goes away in a flash, and you are completely unprotected. And God forbid, your insurance company has already started defending you. They will sue you for their money back, and then they will drop you. It is not worth it, right? But people don't have that in their head. And I don't think partners are comfortable having that conversation with the customer because they don't like making them uncomfortable and feel like their investment is a poor one. You ain't compliant, just quit paying for cyber liability insurance. It's worth it.
Right, exactly. So I know we're about halfway through. I know we had a couple of scenarios. I'd love the path that we're on right now. I'd love to continue on the path right now, but I want to make sure that we're kind of, our audience is kind of expecting, how do we sell this stuff to SMBs, right? And so we have multiple more scenarios, or we can keep going down this cyber path. What do y'all think?
Well, I'd like to just go back to our current scenario and just talk about a few quick objections and what are ways to think about them, right? So it could be your conversation goes great and they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Like you're going to come in, you're going to help me get my compliance right. It's going to protect me. I'm going to be both compliance and resilient. And then we start talking price and they say, whoa, wow, that's really expensive. That's as much as we're paying for our MSP services right now. How do we address that? And how do we talk that through with them because we know what they want, but they're getting sticker shock, and how do we kind of realign that once we get that objection? Open that up to the group. Who wants to go first?
So I'm going to put the MSP hat. I'll put the MSP hat on and not obviously compliance scorecard hat, right? So, as an MSP, we deal with pricing objections all the time, right? And so we need to make sure we have part of our sales playbook well thought out to be able to be preemptive in that, right? And be able to, like, before they even get the sticker shock and we hand them. Now, there's two parts of this, right? If it's an initial conversation, we talk about ranges of prices. We don't actually give them the exact number because, again, we have to do an assessment to figure out where you stand, right? And so, I would approach that with, hey, maybe having the conversation like, well, we're probably not the cheapest around. We're definitely not the most expensive around, kind of bringing that into the conversation of like, yeah, there's probably cheaper, McDonald's version, and there's also like, Rolls Royce version. We're kind of in the middle right there, right? And, we're going to give you a range. Tell you what, we're probably going to start with an assessment, right? We're going to figure out, just like you would, like what's broken with my foot or my skin or whatever, the thing on my nose, we're going to assess you. And that assessment, like we see those going for $10, $20, $30,000, right? Have you ever had an assessment, Jesse?
No, we actually haven't. That's why we're talking today, because
All right. So great, right? You could probably go to Upwork and all the Fivers and the things. You could probably find them ranging $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, right? But if you had an assessment, and this is the conversation I had with the MSP the other day, their optometrist has been paying for assessments. They've been paying $20,000 to $25,000 annually for an assessment.
Right.
Because he had that relationship with the optometrist, he could ask him. He's like, yeah, we're paying 20 grand. You know what? I'm the MSP. You know what? I'm going to do this work for at least 20% less than what you're currently paying. Now, I'm not the most expensive, but I am the most experienced, right? I can tell you about this. I can rattle off because you're an industry expert. Like, I know what goes into ears and blah, blah, whatever the scenario is, right? But coming into that conversation, being educated about their business, right? As Paul said before, vertical specific. I know what that lathe does. I know what that CNC machine does. I'm an expert in that business, and I can talk to them in the terms and relate it back to, you know what, I'm probably not the cheapest, but I'm definitely not the most expensive, but the value, and regurgitate the value around that.
Right. What do you think, Paul?
I think it's well said. I think, and so well said that the only thing that I'll truly add into that at all is that vertical specialization, that industry expertise is translated very well when you remind them that you're a member of their industry. So one of the things I used to use in like real-time conversation, talking to a manufacturer in Michigan somewhere, I would point out that I'm in the DoD supply chain. I'm just like you. I'm in the DoD supply chain. We fill a position therein. We're a service provider for people like you. And you know what, man? I think CMMC is crazy. I think it's not been rolled out super well, and it's a lot for me to keep up with. Are you keeping up with this? What do you think about what's happening? When I would do healthcare, I would look at a doctor and I would say, so we view ourselves as a healthcare organization. And I know it sounds weird. We're an IT company, right? We're a healthcare organization because a lot of my clients, many of my clients look just like you. That means I have the same problem. What are you doing today for your compliance program? Like, how does that currently work? And ask them for an answer that in a way you expect a response to. It's not a yes or no, because the worst question in the world is, are you worried about compliance? No. I'm not. Are you HIPAA compliant? Yes, I am. Right? Like, it's conversation killer. If you're in their position, if you're a part of their industry and you explain it that way and you say, look, so, I know what I'm doing. Tell me about what you're doing today. Because I imagine, if we go down this path, you're going to want me to do the same for you. I'm happy to do so. What are you doing today?
Yeah.
People, when they realize that they're out of their depth, is one of the best moments to talk to somebody and have a real conversation about value versus cost and what that looks like. They realize they're out of their depth. If you scare them, scared people don't buy. So I know so many MSPs that go in here and they're like, dude, you're going to get hacked. They're going to steal all your data. The government is going to fine you $100 million and they're going to put you in jail. And by the end, if they believe you, they're like a shuddering mass huddled in the corner crying, but they didn't get their credit card out. Like, they want to go home and call their mom, right? That's not what we're going for here. What we're going for is to make them understand that they're an expert in what they do. And to an extent, there's a portion of it, you're an expert in what they do, a different layer of this. And there's a place where we come together, and that's, listen, the quote that I'm going to give you is going to be what we put in place for most medical organizations of your size. A medical package looks like, and to Tim, to your point, there's a price range the first time around, but you center it back on who they are. because the worst quote in the world is one full of line items that I don't value, IT terms and acronyms that I don't understand, and a user cost, because and I don't even really love the per user or device model. I think the more modern model where you're saying, like, for your organization right now to take it over is going to be $5,000 a month. And then after that, each additional user package like has a cost, right? But I believe by doing that, you're setting a value on the service as a whole, and we get hung up selling, because every time you say per user, every customer goes, well, Janet only comes in 2 days a week. Is Janet a user? Right? I don't know why it's always Janet, but she never works a full week, right?
And she works from home.
Right.
On our laptop, because we're trying to sell a work from home policy.
Right. Exactly. So go back to that. Janet works from home 4 hours a day.
Yeah. That was some excellent stuff right there.
Yeah.
It's funny. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's funny. Dave earlier commented, said Jesse's on a rampage, and it's funny because he's in the power grid, and we were having this exact conversation today in our office hours. So just getting a little warmed up. So I'm glad he got heard someone other than me say the same thing. Yeah.
But I got a scenario here. I'm just reading this from Dave here.
Yeah. What does it look like to recover from a ransomware attack? And again, tying it to those goals. Like you said, you don't want to scare people, but I think you need to have them face the reality. And like you said, Paul, realize they're out of their depth. If I had a ransomware attack, I would be out of my depth. I want them to say, if I had a ransomware attack, it would suck, but I could be okay and we could be back in business in a couple of days because we have backups, vetted redundancy and everything else that, it wouldn't be fun, but we'd be all right. So
I remember what it was that I wanted to say, and it was kind of backtracking a little bit on what Paul was talking about earlier, and that's words matter. Right? If I go into my customer and I say to them, I want to audit you, they're going to freak out. Right? If I go to my customer and be like, hey, can I assess where you are? Can I evaluate how things are going? Right? But if I walked in there and I'm like, let me audit you, they're going to freak out. I've been doing a lot of research around the psychology of buying and selling, right? And words really matter. And so I did a post on this the other day,
tax audit.
When you use the word audit, where does your brain go? You instantly go to IRS. They're going to rip me apart. I'm going to lose my life, blah, blah, blah. But if I walked in there and I said, hey, why don't we just assess where you are, right? You know what? We're going to move this project forward. I understand now, you're worried about a ransomware attack. In order to figure out where that is, how about we just assess where you are? We evaluate what's going on. You'd never hear the word audit from your doctor. You would hear evaluate. You would hear assess. Right. So when we as MSPs are talking to our customers, right back full circle, use the vernacular that they are used to, and don't scare them away with the word compliance or risk or audit. Talk to them about evaluating where they are, understanding understanding the things that they face. So, all right, off my soapbox.
Yeah. So I'm going to back up here. And I think this is a very real scenario. I kind of cooked this up earlier. So let's just try to do this and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So Jesse, I want you to sell. Tim is going to be a customer. And this customer, here's the scenario. 12-person law firm, 12 partners, 4 admins, 20, 25, longtime MSP customer.
Yeah.
They've consistently bought the full suite of tools, EDR, Duo, firewall, right? Dark web. These guys are in New York State. They lack policy, any kind of governance in the lot, right? Like I said, their entire IT, everything's been fulfilled by the MSP. And they're signing up.
Lawyer?
Yeah, and they're signing up with a new GRC player, right? They're kind of they've got the software and the SaaS to kind of play along. I just want to add this. You don't have to sell them in this conversation. You can sell them in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year. So Jesse, you've got a lot. Like I said, that's kind of the ground rules of where you're coming from, and maybe like I said, I'll ring the telephone for you to call the lawyer here.
Well, a couple quick questions before we get started.
Yeah.
Did they reach out? Did they reach out to us and say we bought this new GRC tool? You said they had a new GRC tool, or is this we set a meeting with them to talk about the need for compliance?
This is just a QBR. You've talked to, I don't know, one of the GRC players. You've kind of signed up for a trial membership, but you have this commitment. But like you said, you don't want to mention the words compliance, as Tim said. But you can mention the word compliance. I mean, this is totally up to you. I'm just saying, with that scenario where you've traditionally been a very tool-heavy shop, which I think a lot of MSPs are, walk me through this kind of like, what's your, at least kind of show me how you're going to soften the beachhead, right? And like get to where, you're eventually getting them into a full-fledged like compliance as a service, like on a monthly retainer.
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing I'd probably want to say is, obviously you guys know with the new regulations that have come out in terms of the FTC and then now HIPAA being something that you have to comply with. Have you guys done any thinking about, or what's your plan for how to meet those requirements and keep your business ahead of the curve there? Have you guys done any thinking there, or is any planning so far?
Well, yeah, I don't really care about HIPAA, to be honest with you. We're a law firm. I mean, we deal with going after criminals, right? So, we want to put those bastards in jail. So I don't care about protecting their medical identity. So yeah, HIPAA, who cares about that? Like, we're from New York here, and I just want to get my bagel. So
what struggles, or what kind of issues have you come across with your program that have caused you to slow down in business?
Well, I don't know. There's, obviously there's tons of criminals that are in New York here. So I don't think I've really had a lot of struggles with the slowdown of the business. In fact, we're overwhelmed with all these records that we kept getting from the damn police on like trying to prosecute these people, right, and or defend them or whatever. Like we are overwhelmed with the amount of like criminals that just keep coming in, and all this paperwork and all these electronic records. I mean, some of them come by fax, most of them come by email. It's just crazy. That's the problem we have, is the bottleneck of all that data coming at us.
Yeah, I hear you. It seems like it exponentially increases every year. I know from our end, like having a lot of customers that are like yourself, we see all of that multiplied through our environment. So we've had to get pretty streamlined about the way we handle our data processing. In terms of the data processing, you say you're overwhelmed. How do you guys plan to address that? Or what's the plan, I guess, so we can be prepared to help you over the next 6 months to a year? Is it to address that influx of data?
I mean, if you could just make it easy to like pop it in our system, and I don't have to think about like, I mean, we get names and addresses and birth dates and social security numbers. I mean, we get all this crap thrown at us. Like sometimes it's thumb drives. Most of the time it's over email. And I'm like, my staff doesn't have any idea what to do with it. Like they're copy and pasting everywhere, saving spreadsheets, trying to do from spreadsheet A. And then, then Paul doesn't have access to Tim's spreadsheet. I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah, I hear you. It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is causing some resource utilization and potentially some margin issues with your employees. Would you consider that accurate?
Well, I mean, yeah, everything's billable hours, right? And so if I'm, if my support staff is, wasting all this time copy and pasting and not really having some process to actually manage that, like, how I run a trial? Like I literally have this step by step. I know what I'm going to say. I know how I'm going to do. Like I have my process for running my trial, but my support staff, like, are you kidding me? Like Sally's, sharing a spreadsheet with Tim. It's just a mess. It's just a mess.
Yeah, I hear you. So it sounds like that's something that we need to solve for you as your technology partner. Would you agree with that?
I mean, if you could fix that, get my staff in order and regain that efficiency, and I can actually bill appropriately and put them on things that matter. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, we'll probably have to go back and figure out a custom plan for you here. But, I think the way we think about security and compliance is that, really those two things are a byproduct of quality. And so when we improve our processes and have efficiencies and optimize how we ingest data, that data is tagged appropriately. We have rules for that. And so that yes, we have compliance and security. And I know, like you said, it's that you're a lawyer, you'll figure it out and you'll probably be able to litigate that away. But I think if we can knock out two birds with one stone and actually create optimizations and help you gain margins in the business while at the same time creating a little bit of a safety net there with your compliance program, that might be a way to approach this. Would you agree with that?
I mean, if you can make my staff more efficient, like win, right? Because if I have to listen, to Johnny Janitor complain one more time about copy and pasting from spreadsheet A to spreadsheet B, and Sally didn't give him access to that spreadsheet, like, oh my God, like just do your job. Like, do your job.
Yeah, like I said, we look at security as a byproduct of quality. And so I think what we should do is come up with a plan that gives you an optimization in processes while doing what we call shifting left and building security and compliance into that stack. Oh,
you mean like proactive? I'm a prosecutor. Like, we're not on the defense side, but we're more on the proactive side, right? So I love that. Like, if we can get more proactive, what did you call it? Shift left.
Shift left, yeah. So I think that's what we'll do. Let's come up with an optimization plan for your data ingest processes, and with that, we'll include a compliance piece where we're tagging that data as it comes in and creating a program to make sure that that's all in the right place. So not only can you increase your efficiency with your admin staff, you can be able to comply with any standards that may come up in the future. And so in a way, we're future-proofing your program while at the same time giving you some business efficiency. So yeah, let us round up and get a plan put together for you, and then maybe we can talk in about a week or something like that.
All right. I'll have my secretary, Tim, give you a call and schedule time, and we can kind of move that forward.
Yeah, sounds good. Can you transfer me over there right now? I want to make sure we get this on the books so we don't...
Time's up. So Paul, what do you think?
I think
Monday morning quarterback here.
I think Tim.
How did the quarterback play?
Are quite powerful there. I think it was a great conversation in general. I think the one thing that if I were to, and please don't put me in the spot and make me play a character out now. But if I were going to add anything to that conversation, and it's funny just because while we're doing it, the scenario you give is very real, right? I think there's 1 million lawyers in the world, and every MSP out there at some point or another is set across the table from a lawyer trying to explain to them risk that they to Tim's all the way through that point they just don't care about, because lawyers do believe they're capable of protecting themselves in any litigious scenario. It's what they do, right? So one of the things that I didn't hear there that I probably would add into the conversation early on is, so in my experience working with attorneys, and I noticed this about what you said when you were telling me about your organization, Tim, it's about half leadership to support staff, meaning for every leader, there's only 1 or 2 employees below them. You have a lot of partners. What did you say? You have 12 partners out of about 30 employees here, right? Yeah. So one of the challenges that I've seen in other scenarios is that leads to a very high speed, high volume series of urgent requests from a half a dozen to a dozen different people going downstream every single day. Yeah. What are you doing to ensure that the people underneath you don't get caught by a social engineering tack or a hit when they have 7 or 8 or 9 different bosses that are not always easily accessible? How do you view that as a risk for yourself? Because that is something that I think they're going to realize.
Everybody reports to me. I'm the boss, damn it. And they all, no, I'm kidding. But you make a good point. I mean, you do make a good point. In those scenarios where you have a lot of transactions happening simultaneously, it can be very easy for that uneducated, I hate to say uneducated, unsecurity educated person to get waylaid. Like, oh my gosh, I just got this email from Tim and I got to send him the data, but the email really wasn't from Tim. It was from a spoofed Tim. And I just sent him all the data and and I'm in New York and I just released 5,000 records. Right. Now I have a data breach notification. Oh my God, I just blew us all up. We're going to hell. Yeah. But yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can see that a scenario where if we're not doing appropriate security awareness training, if we're not doing any sort of phishing simulation and helping those employees recognize it's not Tim Golden, it's Tim Goldman. which happens a lot, by the way. And I just sent him all the data, and oops, it was the wrong Tim. Not even something like, oh, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I think those are things that, I'd want to get into in a future conversation. I think, what you said, Tim, was key, Schnur, is this, you don't have to sell in this conversation. So when I got in there and Tim and Mr. Golden was like, we don't care, we're not going to talk about this. I'm like, ooh, this is going to be a little bit of a, this is going to be a little bit longer. Longer of a sales funnel, right? So let's talk about what in your business you want to solve, and let's start to positively associate that solution with our cybersecurity and compliance program. And then we can talk more about what that looks like. And I think what you said is very important. Like, we talked about it like, hey, all this back and forth, like, oh yeah, employees could get phished, and they could, you could have a data breach. But if they don't care about a data breach, right? Like he just said, like we'd be fine. Like that's not really important to him. So what is important to him? The optimization of his processes and billable hours, and how are we going to support that with this program? And at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot more conversations, because this was definitely a top of funnel client the minute we got into that. So yeah,
right. Well, but in like in my work as an MSP dealing with law firms, all they give a shit about is billable hours and efficiency.
Yeah, it's funny.
All the other stuff, I can litigate my way out of.
Yeah, you gave me a tough one, because when I was running the vCISO program at our MSP, we specifically qualified out law firms because of similar types of conversations. But I love a good challenge, so I appreciate that scenario.
So I made that comment. I love how you baked in, as you said, efficiency, automation with security and compliance.
Right.
It's really no different than developing software, right? Because if you develop software and it's buggy and it's got, vulnerabilities, it's a problem. So you're delivering a efficiency proposal, right? And it's just baked in that security and compliance are going to become part of that. Like, you don't have, can you get away with never mentioning the word compliance, but effectively selling him compliance and using Paul Redding's tool, right? I think you probably can, right? I mean, you can do all the things. You can start policies and track and I think compliance is a lot of it's just like project planning, right? A lot of it is just people doing things at a certain time and reviewing things. So when you baked in this automation and efficiency play, it's gonna require software, maybe not. It's gonna require some kind of tech play, and I think that's built in. And more things should be like that, right? I mean, AI. We don't even want to go down that road, but everything about all these efficiencies with digitalization, it's like, right, when are you going to pay the security tax?
Yeah. To Paul's point, are you sick of 6 or 7 different people contacting you, asking you for the same thing? We need to put some governance in place around that, so you get security, because people have to follow a procedure and they can't just do stuff. Isn't that annoying? Oh yeah, I hate when that happens. Right. So it's going to take annoyance out of your life, and it's going to create a more secure environment for you, right? So we're enabling the business while protecting the business, and I think that business discussion is exactly. It's hard to do in the moment, especially when you have somebody who's getting under your nerves or being difficult, right? But you just talk slower, take a breath, and just think about why they may be being that way, and be curious and start asking questions, right?
Guys, I have to throw this out there while we're having this conversation right now. Popping up on my other monitor here is an email from a former officer of the company of Stendia that I'm with, a guy that is an officer or was, and it says, "Hello, Paul. Kindly include your cell phone number in your response to this email. I am currently in a virtual presentation and need your assistance on a task ASAP." Hey.
Right away, sir.
Not always we're doing a presentation around security. I just got my hourly, smishing and phishing message. Here we go.
That's too funny.
And your date of birth and your
Please follow with your bank account number.
I got one. Again, I'll similar here, and then we're gonna need to get into our key takeaways. But we got one this morning to our billing address, which was, please remit the overdue balance for your tech E&O insurance and it actually came from the Hartford group, which we used like 3 years ago and have never talked to them since, right? Please, and like we're sending you to collection. Like I was going to send this to our good friend Will and others over at Fifth Wall because it came from the right domain, right? It came from the real web address, and I'm looking at the body of the message, and it's like you are fined $200 for not doing your ongoing tech E&O insurance, and please click here to fill it out. And I'm like, it actually is legitimate, but it's a phishing scam from the company trying to get me to re-up with them that I ignored 3 years ago because I moved to a different company. And I'm like, how can they get away with this crap? It's actually the company scaring me into renewing my thing because I'm now in collections for a thing that I actually never even bought. It's crazy. It's totally crazy.
I wonder if it was they didn't have DMARC set up, so someone was just able to spoof their address.
Yeah, well, I haven't investigated it yet, but yes, it's like legitimately their domain.com. So anyways, I digress, but this stuff like happens all the time. And, for us as security people, as compliance people, being able to have a relatable risk conversation is what this really all boils down to. We're on our last 5 minutes. We'd like to take this opportunity to have at least one key takeaway. Jesse, Paul, or Tim, are either of you ready? And I'll bring you up first.
Yeah, go ahead, Tim.
All right, Mr. Schnurr, what is your key takeaway?
Yeah, so key takeaway, like I said, selling compliance, don't ever mention the word compliance. Words matter, as Tim said. You're really just trying to add value to the business. So they probably had, I put this scenario out there specifically about a legacy MSP that had a layer of tools, and now they're trying to sell many of the aspects of people and process. Jesse, I don't know if that got kind of mixed into the exchange you had with Tim here, but we'd love to do this again. But like I said, words matter. You're trying to add value to the business. Security, doesn't always equal compliance, but it can equal compliance. And if that serves as best practices, you need people and processes as in addition to technology. So, like I said, I love this exchange that Jesse just had on selling, kind of upscaling the business. Take it a little bit by bit, right? You don't have to sell them all in one call. It's meeting by meeting by meeting. You've got a year to do this, but you want to transition into adding these to your line card.
All right, Mr. Jesse, you good for next?
I'm good, man. Let's do it. Yeah, I think a couple of things we didn't get to talk about. I want to say that Paul's advice on aligning with social proof for their specific industry is very important. So if you go in and you talk about some great results you got for an SEC regulated investment firm, and it's a HIPAA regulated dentist office, they're going to say, so what? we don't care about that. So I think that I'm going to do two takeaways. So I think that's super important. And then the other piece to remember through all of this is we always tend, because we're all selfish by nature, we always tend to make ourselves the hero of the story and talk about what we can do and how good our systems are and why the client needs to use us for their security. Well, remember that the client is the hero and you're the guide to their hero story. So you need to find out what their hero story is in their own mind and how you play into that and facilitate that and make that achievable for them as a business and as a founder or business owner.
We don't need another hero. Oh, sorry. Sorry, my brain just, when I hear the word hero and I go right to it. Yeah. Paul, what about you, my friend? And great stuff, Jesse. Thank you for that.
I'll tell you something that I don't think we touched on today that I would like to kind of leave everyone with, because I think we've had some great points that were very well made, and you guys are killing it on your follow-ups here. The last thing I would say is when you go to an MSP community event, I don't know, go to IT Nation or DattoCon or wherever you want to go, and you see all of us in the industry together, and you wonder, why are these people, these MSPs, not like competitive with each other. You see two MSPs from the same city sitting at a bar, having drinks, sharing the war stories, and becoming best of friends. And why is that? Why is this industry not competitive with each other? And how the hell does that make any sense in the conversation we're having about? And I'll tell you what it is. Other than other MSPs that you meet and people like us in the industry, nobody knows what the hell you're talking about. On a day in, day out basis, they don't know people. You're talking to your customer. If you talk to them the way that you talk to me, they don't know what the hell you're talking about. And so you have to drop the MSP lingo, the acronyms, the push for enterprise tools in a small business environment. Nobody cares. You have to figure out what your customer cares about. You just stole one of the things I was going to make a point with, which is people are selfish. They care about their own business, their own industry, and their own expertise and world. And you have to relate to them in that way. So if you can turn the conversation from look at all my cool nerd shit, right, into, hey, let me show you how to focus on your business and grow while I take away the risk and improve your business workflows, then I'll pay you for it. And if not, you're selling nerd stuff that I just don't care about.
I love that. And you where am I at? You stole my thunder.
That's the worst. That's the danger of going last, right?
Yeah, like where's the button for me? Like, no, but this is great stuff, right? Because I know we're over time now, but I'm gonna take my own damn opportunity because I can because I'll it, right? And so, yeah, back to what Paul was saying, like speak in the terms that customers can understand, speak their vernacular, speak their language, right? Get the geek conversation out of it. As Tim Schnur said, don't mention the word risk or compliance. Talk to them about, as Jesse says, business outcomes, right? Shift left the conversation and shift it into what is that business doing? Speak in their terms, speak in their vernacular, and relate it to them and relate it to their needs and their wants and their things that keep them up at night. Find a different way of saying what keeps you up at night. Why are you here? Right? That would be my key takeaway is talk to them like they're 5. So I will leave us with we are 1 minute over. Thank you, everybody, for allowing us to stay a little bit later. We are always cognizant of the time. Next week is a holiday week, and there's a couple of birthdays happening on those Fridays. One of them happens to be mine. Not that I want kudos, and I think there's one in Jesse's family as well. So we won't be here next week. Maybe we'll run a replay. Maybe we won't. But we all know what happens on 4th of July week. So stay vigilant, stay safe. Turn off all your rats, right? All your remote access tools, your team viewers, and all of that stuff for the weekend. Get through the following week because we know 4th of July is always a big thing for our adversaries. So stay safe, everybody. Enjoy the week and maintain your fingers along the way. So we'll catch you in 2 weeks.
Subscribe now.